Hello and welcome to this Remtec Talent Management podcast. And today, talking about what could be a mission critical skill set for those of you that are looking to raise finance from either general investors or the venture capital community. And that subject is really around the presentation skills required to really get across your message. And I'm joined today by two experts in this area, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And then we're going to have a great conversation around how you can really optimize this skill set, which might make the difference between success and failure, quite frankly, because when the investment market is so difficult as it is at the moment, making a small improvement to your, shall we call it, investor pitch could make a huge impact on your success of your business. So I'm going to pass you over. First of all, Joey, can you give me a quick overview, if you could, please, of your background and your interest in this area?
Thanks, Nigel. Hi there. Yeah, it's Joey Mason here. I've spent my career in the life sciences sector across many aspects, from medicine to banking to investing, and I've been the last 20 years or so investing as a venture capital investor, also raising some funds, and I'm currently wearing a number of hats. One is with a venture debt provider, so it's for slightly later stage companies, but also I work with a venture capital firm here in Ireland as well. And I'm also raising funds for a company at the moment. So live experience, I guess, of what you're trying to articulate.
Very good. And you, Colin?
Yes, thanks, Nigel. After having spent about 20 years in the city, decided to set up my own business, which is called Presentation Works, and there's a bit of a clue in the name there. It's helping people presenting and public speaking, and therefore it's something that is combining 20 years of business experience with what I might call my first love, which is basically stage acting. So a lot of time, one way or another, spent in front of audiences. And so that's what brought me to this point.
Very good. Thank you very much. And thank you, both of you, enormously for joining me for this podcast, which, as I say, I think hopefully people, when they see this, may think this couldn't come at a better time because of the challenging situation in terms of the investment market. And I think, kind of the things that people need to be thinking about really is some of them fundamentals that, Colin's perhaps going to touch on, and I'm sure trains on. And some of those are also going to be maybe the things which we all need to know, which are what turns people off when you're making this type of presentation. So in other words, how you might avoid letting yourself down. But for those, Joey, perhaps for those people who are maybe new to this, there may be a number of new CEOs or CFOs who've not had to pitch for finance before. Can you give us a kind of overview of what it looks like? What are the types of interactions, if you like, that they're going to have with investors, so they can really have a feel for the type that there is?
Sure. I guess you can kind of come at it from all sorts of different angles. And the first one is the one that you have, which is your own company. And your own project. And if I'm the CEO of that, I need to understand for myself, how valuable is it? How big is this opportunity that I'm about to talk to people about? And that's really important because it sets the stage for not alone, how you might pitch the company, but just for simple things like your own confidence. If you think you have an opportunity that could be potentially be worth billions to investors, you should let them know. I mean, their job is to sell money and your job is to buy money. But if you can articulate why you have an enormously exciting opportunity that they're privileged to hear from you, that really sets a conversation, can get a conversation going. If you don't know how much your company is potentially worth or where it's going, then your lack of certainty or lack of clarity on what you're offering comes straight across to investors because they don't actually know what you're asking them to buy. A lot of what goes on in investing is variations on the theme of know your customer, understand what you're selling. And once you understand what you're selling, you can actually then start to position it. And what do I mean by that? Essentially, if you have a company that, and I start at the end, it's always, how much will this sell for? Because if I'm asking for investors if I want to buy money from investors, and I'm asking them to buy shares from me, their first question is, how do I get out? What's the exit? So you have to have that thought all the way through. You don't have to have a perfect answer. That's not possible.
And that's kind of your preparation. Yeah. So in terms of, from Colin's perspective, I'm sure you maybe talk about being prepared, etc. And in terms of how it actually looks when is it a Teams call or a meeting at what are the types of kind of environment, shall we say, that this person or people, maybe it might be a CFO and a CEO doing a double act. How does that work?
So it's a process, as you're saying, Nigel, and it can happen in many different ways. What you typically want to do is get to understand or get to meet investors. You can meet them through conferences. You can send emails to them. You can get introductions. Typically, warm introductions are very helpful. And what people need to understand is, as they're talking to investors, it is a process that takes quite a while. And you have to be prepared to get to know who you're dealing with. So you can, I'd say, again, going back to what I think Colin will help you prepare at the beginning, understand who you're talking to. Are you offering an opportunity that is of the right size for their fund? Venture funds advertise what they will invest in, what range they're in, pre-seed, seed, Series A to B, tickets, how much they will invest. You can do homework on that and then say, okay, I fit your criteria, X, Y, and Z. Will you spend a bit of time and I'll tell you a little bit about my company? You don't have to be shy about it. And I say, if you are typically on the very first meeting, you're just introducing yourselves. And I say, we've an adage to the saying earlier, best thing, if you ask for money, you get advice. If you ask for advice, you get money. You might get money. So typically you ask people like, look, will you listen to the pitch? We'll be out fundraising in 6 months or 3 months. What would you like to see? How can we?
I think that's great advice. That's kind of the preliminary, isn't it? And in terms of, turning to you, Colin, if you're, say this is going to be a Teams call, are there some kind of general areas that, in terms of that preparation, that people should be thinking about in terms of how it comes across, really, the general presentational aspects of it, which people can get so wrong? What would the kind of top tips on there would be from your perspective?
Well, I think the points in general are that people spend a lot of time thinking about the what. They'll maybe write down the key numbers, they'll write down the key elements of what it is they want to introduce potential investors to. They may or may not, as Joey's just said, they may or may not have definitive answers to how long the company growth is going to take to reach a point at which it might have an exit of any sort. So all of those things are going to be their focus before preparing. The bit that matters as much is how. How are they going to do that? How are they going to put those numbers? How are they going to introduce the company? And the one thing that is common to every presentation, not just a pitch, is to remember that anyone you're talking to is immediately focused on the same thing. Your audience for the day is immediately focused on the same thing, and that is, what's in it for me? So it doesn't matter how long you take getting those facts and figures right until you satisfy something quantifiable in answer to that question. Your audience is hanging. They're waiting for the off. They're waiting for some kind of hook. So you can have a preparation about how this wonderful idea came to be for the last 20 years and how you woke up suddenly dreaming the impossible dream and how you're going to put it together. Nobody's listening. What's in it for me has to be at the front end of the pitch.
That's a really interesting thought, because I remember thinking before doing this podcast, It's always a bit nerve-wracking for me doing a podcast with Colin McLean, because I'm thinking he's probably assessing how crap my presentation skills are, and have I in fact
You
done
see my right hand move I'm making. It's not moved so
I
far, so
think
don't worry.
he's probably wondering what it is that I've made it so that it's what's in it for you. So if that wasn't clear enough at the beginning, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening, then the clear thing for what's in it for you is, at the end of this, you're going to have some really hot tips on how to make those presentations that much sharper and more likely to be successful. But I think I did get that across, didn't I, Colin, at the beginning?
You certainly did, yes.
Ah, thank you. That's a big relief. So where does it go wrong? Let's go back to Joey. You must have seen hundreds of these, possibly thousands, and you've been actually on the other side of the desk where you're doing it yourself. Where do they get it, in your opinion? And obviously, ladies and gentlemen, this is Joey Mason's opinion. Other people might have opposites, but we'll challenge some of that maybe. But where do they go wrong, do you think, sometimes?
I think the starting point is, as you're already saying, is like people are wondering straight away, what's in it for me? And the easiest way I find to deal with it, and where I appreciate most when I'm seeing investments or propositions, give a summary at the start. What are you doing? How much do you want? Like, that gets to the what is in it for me, and how much will you give back? You might give a sense of that, but make it very clear at the beginning, because it's typically, I mean, if venture are pretty much like me, attention span of gnats. By slide 2, they're bored. And if they're at slide 10 and you still haven't told them what you want, they're on their phone. They're doing something else. You've lost the audience. So get out, and some of the hardest things to do, as I'm sure Colin will attest, you really have to think hard to make things put on one slide, and you start with the first sentence. Make it really clear what it is, what your proposition is, how big it is. And I kind of think of things in technology, market, team, and you can have a bullet point and all, and then what's the ask? So this is what the meeting's about. I'm asking for 10 million. I may not be asking you for it today, but that's the number. And by the way, the investors are numbers people. That's their job. They're numbers. And so giving a long spiel about how you, as they fell off a horse and came up with this idea, and it affects because your father fell, it's just fluff.
So nobody cares statements are always. I always think in any kind of sales or marketing, it's always good to ask that question. Pretty much what Colin was saying, and apply the nobody cares test. Because if somebody goes, actually, no, I don't care, then it's probably you're wasting your breath, aren't you?
And so, and then you're, once you've got somebody hooked or at least interested in what you're doing, you then say, okay, well, here's the technological base, or here's the market I'm talking about, and it's huge, and it's a massive unmet need, because medicine and life science in general is full of unmet needs. You can talk about it, and you can actually put numbers on it, so it does make it, relatively speaking, an easier pitch than for a lot of other kinds of companies. To say why your tech is different, you can run through stuff very quickly, but you have to get people interested in what you're doing, and it's relevant to them, that you're actually... There's no point in asking, $1 billion fund for a 500,000 check. They're like, that's it's just the wrong ask. You need to understand. Say back to the audience. So to me they're the big things where I get instantly switched off is, we've chatted about it before, is the science lesson. An awful lot of medical and life science stuff start talking about science, and that's all very well and good, but we're not a grant body. It's the comfort zone for whoever's pitching it. Typically, you've got to try and put yourself in the shoes of the person sitting across the camera from you. What's their job? Their job is to sell money. You need to help understand their language and speak in their language. That's massively the biggest thing. Numbers don't come in. They bring in numbers way too late.
So you've done, as we've said, both sides of the desk. When you've been, how do you establish what this person, because before we pressed record earlier, we were talking about the science lesson thing, and I gave a counterpoint to Joey, saying that somebody had said to me that in fact some VCs now on drug discovery, a lot of them PhD backgrounds, and they love the science and they want to hear that. So how do you, when you're on that side of the bench, how do you what are your top tips for evaluating what they might want to hear?
Well, I mean, sorry, first thing is you can do your homework and understand who I'm talking to. They will advertise that. It'll be on their website. So you can actually see what people invest in, what's interesting. Even if somebody's, a PhD, you're meeting somebody who's got a PhD in molecular science or in genetics or whatever, great. You can have a very deep technical conversation with them. Their job is still to sell you money. So they bring this proposition back to the office and talk to their investment committee or talk to their colleagues. And somebody said, I don't care about the number, about the science. Is this a market that's relevant? What's the competitive landscape? Do these people have IP? Who's ultimately going to buy this company? Those kinds of questions will get asked anyway. And so you can get into it almost like as you're thinking of presentations. I need to have maybe prep for the few kinds of people I'm going to be potentially meeting. And there's, you have your normal 5-6 slides. You can always go into an appendix which says, okay, here's the technical deep dive. Here's a piece on the IP. Here's a piece on the competitive landscape that I understand deeply, but I'm just not going to put into the top 4 or 5 slides. And so you can adjust, you can prepare for that. So your presentation can be, 10 slides with 40 backups. And that's perfectly reasonable. People are completely happy. Oh, that's a great question. Let me take you to the next piece. If you really, really want to know that. But, if somebody's asking deeply technical questions at your intro meeting, it means they're very inexperienced because they're not asking the right questions. That's just almost, well, I won't say what it is, but it's not necessarily focused on the investment.
I mean, all business relationships are two-way streets, aren't they? So I suppose, we perhaps even suggesting that maybe you realise that investor isn't the right investor for you if they're inexperienced and asking the wrong questions, which is probably something for the investment community to maybe think about. But Colin, in terms of presentational, and I'm probably doing them all the time while we're having this conversation. You see, it's making me feel nervous thinking about it. What are the presentational errors that people make? I was trying to think of a polite word for it there. What are the general presentation, whether it's online or whether it's in person?
Well, I don't know about errors as such, but I think the big piece that's missing is not practicing, not rehearsing, not actually doing something, even with a colleague in a kind of mock-up situation, having the process mapped out in your head. What are you actually going to say when you open your mouth? What's your first sentence going to be? How are you going to do it? How do you look and feel while you're doing it? The more you've practiced, the more you've rehearsed that, the more genuine it's going to seem, and the more confidence you've got in that process at the point at which it matters when you're pitching. I mean, I think that the thing that needs to be perhaps worked around in advance in people's head is we're talking about investing, or people potentially investing a whole lot of money in your idea, in your business, or the business that at least you've been charged to run. Money is not the reason that you set the business up, but it can't function without it. And what point you're asking for the money can be critical for the business, but it can also be ultra critical for this meeting. Because if you know that the lifeblood is going to run out if you don't succeed in this or one subsequent meeting soon, the pressure on you to deliver a good presentation and to get the interest of a potential investor at that time isn't just important, it's huge. It's absolutely massive. And the one thing we don't need when we're presenting, particularly if we're doing so in person, standing up in front of, in a boardroom when we've got 4 or 5 people there, the one thing we don't need is any kind of extra pressure. We all know It's hard enough standing up on your feet and talking to other people. Some find it dead easy, but for most of us, it takes a bit of time, takes a bit of practice. So really think about the timing of this and how you're going to cope with that extra pressure. It all leads back, to answer your point, it all leads back to being as prepared as you can be. So you need to find out absolutely everything you can, as Joey's already said, about are you pitching actually to the right people? Do you match their criteria? That's a critical point. But who are they? What are they?
And in terms of that, moving in almost into the realms of psychology, in terms of dealing with the pressure, when you're coaching people about dealing with pressure, and you coach people to present in front of hundreds of people. I mean, any top tips there? I mean, I know it's probably a big subject which we haven't got time for, but just a couple of areas that to give an indicator of how you can deal with that pressure.
Well, there is no alternative to being as prepared as you can be. So absolutely anything you know about, clearly if we're in this environment, if we're in the online environment, we've got Zoom or Teams or whatever it is that we're using in order to present. Make sure that you understand that for a start. So if you're suddenly asked to present on a Teams meeting and you've never worked with Teams before, for heaven's sake, don't let the pitch be the first time you use it. Again, dead easy to set up, but I mean, dozens of times. Yeah. That's what happens. Or you join the meeting a minute before it's due to happen, only to find, and this is certainly true of Zoom, that it's going to have another quite substantial update that day. So even though it may only take a minute or two, you're sitting there fretting, unable to get online at the very minute the people you're trying to present are saying, has he forgotten? Is he going to be able to be with us? It seems like a fraction of time, but actually it's adding, again, critical pressure at the critical moment. All of that stuff is technical, but it all adds up to the same thing. Know the technology, know the room, know the venue. If you're going to have to drive somewhere to get there, know how long it's going to take, and then add at least half an hour before you think you want to be there to set off, because traffic happens and the world happens. These are eminently practical things, but they're all things that are within your control. So the big tip is whatever is within your control. What are you going to wear? What's going to be behind you if you're going to be on a Teams call and you're pitching? Are you going to have a busy office of people behind you because that's what you want your potential investors to see? Or, are you going to be in your car in a car park and all they can see is the Tesco sign behind you? It's not a great look if that's the moment that you're trying to hook people into a really significant idea. So anything, just about anything that is within your control, you need to have thought about and practiced, and if it's in terms of your pitch, rehearsed before the event. Because absolutely every minute that you spend rehearsing your pitch is going to come back to your favour when you come to do it.
Great advice. Yeah.
I mean, in terms of return on investment, it's 100%, 150% every time that you spend 5 minutes researching, or rather rehearsing, a 5-minute pitch.
So actually, Colin, I think it's a very good point. It's kind of making me just think there are different presentations that you're going to do, and maybe this is what I was trying to say at the beginning, not very well. When you first meet somebody, that could be at a conference, it could be through an email and stuff, but it's essentially a screening call. Sure. Is there enough common ground here that we should have a proper conversation? To my mind, the kind of presentation you're describing there, Colin, is what you end up doing when you're essentially pitching to the partnership. So this is when you've gone through the first level of screening, and you're now, okay, this is serious. The way you know when an investor is interested is when they do work. That's because that's all they have is time. And if they spend time on you, it means they're not spending time on something else. And that's really important. And by the way, just as a tip, if they don't say yes, the answer is no. So that's another tire kicking, get rid of waste, tire kicking as you're going along. But if you get to meet a partnership, that's that presentation style that you're talking, Colin. I completely agree. Know who's going to be on the meeting. What boards do they sit on? You can do all of this background work and find out. And then the more prep you have for your own presentation, the better. I completely concur. I think the idea of having somebody with you always when you're doing the presentation is really helpful. Somebody who's on your side, because you can't broadcast and listen at the same time. It's simply impossible. You need to have somebody reading the room for you. I get one of my colleagues regularly kicks me. It's like, shut up. And like, what he meant was, and that comes through. Or, by the way, oh, that's a great question. Joey ignored it. Here you go. And I kind of distinguish them, by the way, just again, in terms of expectations. If I'm looking at a publicly listed company, I expect the CEO to be coached to within a centimeter of their life. They should look perfect. That's their job. They're outwardly focused, talking to investors. If I'm looking at a startup, I don't expect them to be like that. I expect them to be kind of a bit raw and a bit unscripted, and the deck being okay, but not brilliant. It's not meant to be. And so you don't have to set your standard. Put it positively. Set your standard to the level of company that you're at.
So that's almost kind of the know your audience in reverse, isn't it? So that's the investor knowing his or her audience.
Can I just make a comment to that, Joey? And that is that I fully understand the point and the distinction that you're making, but it's a little bit like being really prepped for a big Zoom or Teams call. You've got 20, 30 people on that screen. You have the opportunity, if you're really properly prepped, you've got the right audio, you've got your camera set up, you've thought about your background and how things look. You have got the possibility, the opportunity, in equal measured space to everybody else, we all get the same size box, to pop off that screen. And therefore, even at the startup level, if you are the CEO who admittedly is not yet, trained, as you say, rehearsed within a centimetre, but they nonetheless are better than the 5 others that you heard yesterday and the 5 more that you're going to hear tomorrow. You've got an opportunity to give yourself that little level up.
Yeah, it's getting a hearing, isn't it, to some extent?
It's just, and one of the key things in this is, even at the introductory level, and you made that distinction very well as well, that there are degrees of presentation here and different sorts. But even at the introduction, you want to achieve 2 things. You want to set your stall, and you want to give them some idea of who you are and what the business is about and what the opportunity is, get a sense of the hook. But you must make yourself in some way memorable, because we've all gone to conferences, and we're not talking there necessarily about presentations, but we've gone to conferences and we've had conversations at 10 o'clock in the morning, and by 6 o'clock in the evening, we've met dozens of people. Who's the one you remember tomorrow? We've got cards. I've done this dozens of times myself. You get handed a business card and you look at it the next day and you think, I have no idea whether I stole it or somebody actually had a conversation that backed this up. So you've got to put a bit of glue, is what I'm trying to say. Something that adheres you to their memory. So that is nearly always it is in the way in which you come across, and that might be just literally having the opportunity to have a different way of introducing yourself.
How many people, Joey? You must have seen loads of these presentations, either formal or informal. How many of them would you say are good from a point of view of what Colin's just been talking about? And they don't have to be Microsoft or Medtronic polished, do they? I mean, they need to be good enough. How many of them are just not really very good, and they're possibly letting themselves down? What a rough guesstimate percentage?
I would say every presentation I've ever seen could be better. I mean, it's just nothing is perfect, right? I think once you go into I'd almost put the bucket of if I'm thinking science lesson or technology lesson, depending on the sector, if you're looking at your presentation saying, I don't come to a number for 6 slides or 7 slides, that to me it would be they're the presentations I really struggle with, because I keep asking myself, what's the ask? What do they want?
This must be, sorry to interrupt, this must be quite common, otherwise it wouldn't be a thing for you.
So common. I guess, Colin, to your presentation, I can just remember last week, we were looking at a presentation, a guy was essentially giving us a lecture. He was reading the slides. Like, I can read too. I don't need that, especially over Zoom, because there's no interaction. So I would say the vast majority of presentations we see don't come to the point. It's not like, it's almost like saying that I don't know what you do, whereas they're basically asking you to invest in their company, fund it in some way, equity or debt, and that, I think, I would say the vast majority of companies could do that better. To your point, Colin, on the just on the being different, I agree. You want to be memorable, in some way, differentiable. What makes it very differentiable, though, as a proposition is because this is all about, selling money. It's greed. Is this a really, really exciting opportunity? And having that, you pick up that sense of here's a real opportunity, is far more memorable, and it'll embed much more strongly than somebody's wearing flamboyant tie or great glasses or something. Because all of that stuff is really professional. You have to come across professionally. I wear jackets, shirts when I go, because it's important to look the right way when you're presenting, for sure.
Yeah, and I think you're as much as anything talking about the message and as much as how the person might look, or if they look a mess, mind you, that can make them very memorable. We've all been to those types of conferences, particularly in the life science community. There were a few I saw at a meeting recently, but I better not describe, just in case they might be listening or watching this podcast. Fantastic stuff, and I think really, really beneficial. So going back to your point earlier, Colin, about the what's in it for you, and I think as far as this podcast is concerned, the what's in it for anyone that's listening is probably loads from what you've just discussed in just slightly more than half an hour. So just to finish off, 3 things, Joey, let's go to you first. 3 things, 3 immediate actions somebody could do to make sure that they present what they're about better, would you say?
I'd prepare, and prepare. And I think there's Colin saying that, prepare your presentation, prepare how you pitch. Have somebody with you. So always do it with somebody else, and understand your audience. Just have done something that says, I know who I'm talking to, when you're doing the first pitch, because it's an intro. That's and I'd stop it at that for me, because that's where I see most companies. It's that opening meeting, that opening introduction. I want you to if you can show to me that you have some understanding of what I do, I am automatically going to be more well disposed towards you.
And Colin, he might have stolen some of your thunder there, but 3 things.
No. If it's a good point, it's worth repeating, and the repetition is prepare. It is absolutely that. Prepare what you're going to say. Prepare in as much detail as you can. For one reason, fundamentally, if you don't prepare what you're going to say, if you don't have at least, if not necessarily, a script, you've no idea how long you need to pitch. You don't know what it's going to take. Do not find that out live. Know if you need 7 minutes or 10. Because when you get the chance to talk and make the meeting and say, look, I'm going to need 8 minutes of your time, two things immediately strike the potential investor straight off. They know what they want to say, and they've thought about my time, my precious time.
Yep.
And and I'm very inclined to give them 8 minutes if they ask for 8 minutes. Don't just say, oh, it'll be around 10 minutes, because inevitably it won't. It'll be 12. And so just practice, just know what you need. So that's the most important aspect. Understand, and this is something we haven't got time to explain fully, but if you're interested, you can find out. Understand the principle of the 180-degree view. If you're the one presenting, you've really got to understand what you look and sound like from the other side. And there's a whole piece we could do on the 180-degree view, but that's essentially what it's about, in knowing and learning how to tell an audience what's in it for them and then delivering it. So I suppose the kicker really is rehearse. Make sure you get the time with someone who can genuinely give you some feedback that is valuable. Rehearse what it is you want to do. Be prepared to take a few hints and tips. Don't just think, well, I know what I want to say, that's good enough. There isn't an actor on this planet who would go out in the West End of London and perform a one-man show without rehearsing it for a number of weeks with a professional director. And they are professional actors. They don't just learn the lines. And we in business have to both remember that and reflect on it, but also act on it. We need to rehearse.
Very good. And as a blatant sales pitch, because this is obviously from Remtec Talent Management, and Colin does work with us, so I would say one of the key things, as with so many aspects in life, is get trained. These presentations that you're going to be doing, whether the informal or formal, if you can, I mean, I think, Colin, you've said this great thing, that however good somebody is at presenting, you can improve them by at least 10%. And sorry for the scientists that are watching or listening, that it's a difficult one to evaluate that, but it gives an indication of an idea. And in fact, it goes back to one of the things that Joey said earlier, which is that most presentations can be improved. Now, if we're thinking about, from a management point of view, the kind of what's the phrase? The management of margins or marginal matters. I can't remember what the proper phrase is, but if you can just improve how you're presenting and avoid all of those things that Joey's talked about, the mistakes that people make, just imagine that might make the difference between success and failure in terms of actually raising that money. So the sales pitch really is, do get in touch with us. Colin or a colleague can either do one-to-one training, or we can in fact do classroom training, particularly for those that have maybe not done this type of thing before. So do get in touch with us on that. Last thing to say is thanks huge amounts to Joey, who is always great on these podcasts. The second one you've done with us, hopefully you'll do even more. Love the enthusiasm and so on. And of course, Colin, as ever, who's somebody I've known for even longer than I've known Joey. Always a pleasure to have you with us as well, Colin. So many thanks to both of you for your time. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope everyone's enjoyed listening or watching. So thank you very much. This I will log off. Thank you so much, everybody.